Hello everyone, welcome back. This is part 16 and today, as I mentioned last time, we are gonna do the lighting for the scene. But first, before we start that, I'm gonna adjust a few things. After I watched the scene a little bit with all the elements, I realized some few things I'd like to adjust, like the door size. It's pretty big compared to the rest of the scene. I think it's like 2.7 meters in height, and usually a door would be like 2.1 meters. So I'm not gonna show you how I'm doing it because all of this you already know. And voila, for the door. And there was also the window that it doesn't feel too big, but at least it's a bit too high for like a human normal size character to reach it. So I'm gonna shift it a bit down and maybe scale it down a bit. And that's it for the window. The last thing I wanted to adjust was the size of these tiles. I feel they are also a bit too big. So what I'm gonna do is make them something like half the size. Just like that. Okay. So now I've managed to adjust the latest things I wanted to do. So it's time to move on to the lighting. Okay, so to explain to you the way I light things, this is the scene I'm gonna use. I just build it quickly. And for me, there are three types of lights. First one is the atmospheric light, okay, which is, let's say, like this is a planet, okay, and this is the sun. Most of the rays are gonna hit our planet directly, but if we draw here some, let's say, just imagine they are clouds, okay, the rays goes like that, and then they bounce around like this. So this is what I call the atmospheric light or the ambient light. And this is what we see here on the side. It doesn't have any harsh lights, and you also have like very soft shadows because it's bouncing a lot in every directions. And in fact, where you've got those smooth shadows, this is usually called ambient occlusion, and this means these are the areas where the ambient light doesn't hit enough, so it creates an area of shadow. Okay? Then, of course, you've got the sunlight, which is something hitting directly our objects. So if we turn that on, here we've got our sun, and usually what it does, it's creating harsh shadows like that, very sharp shadows, and bright lighting. This is the second type of lights. And you've got the third type, which I call artificial lights, and which are usually light source from human activities. And this would be those kind of lights, like interiors lights or exteriors lights. And that would be the three main kind of lighting that you would have in a scene. Okay, so now I'm gonna go through all of them to explain how you can set them up. I'm gonna hide my artificial light and my sunlight, and let's start with the ambient lighting. The ambient lighting is controlled here in Blender. In the World Properties panel, you've got also a shader, okay, which is by default just a simple color with a strength value. You can adjust the strength value to light more or less the environment, and of course you can also change its color, tint the lighting. But as for the materials, of course there is a way to improve it. So if we go to the shader editor, we also have here drop-down lists at the top of this window. It's set to object at the moment, but you can set it to world, and we will find again the exact same thing that we have here, but as nodes. So a world output, so this is needed if you want to see anything in your world, and then here you've got our background node. To make it more interesting, because if you think of it, when you've got our environment and the light is bouncing, it is bouncing on a lot of things. Like here, if I am to show this, it's bouncing on the house, on the lamppost, and everything around. And all of these things have different colors. At the moment, they all have the same color, of course, but in reality, all of them have different color. So what we use for that is an image that are called HDRI, that stands for High Dynamic Range Image, meaning that they have a lot more color values than what normal images have. So here I can add a texture and choose an environment texture. This node is set up especially for this kind of images. If I unplug this here and I plug my environment in the world output, at the moment I only have some kind of pink, very strong pink color. This indicates that I don't have any texture yet, and now I just have to go and look for one. I have a folder with a few HDRI maps. Okay, and this I have downloaded from a website which is called Polyheaven. They've got a lot of really high quality HDRIs which are free to use. So I recommend you to go and get some of this if you can, if you want to. Okay. And so now I'm gonna just select one randomly, and instead of having a simple color, we can plug this environment texture in the color input. Okay, I'm gonna reduce the strength to 1, and see, now it's this image that is lighting our scene. What's great about that, I'm gonna show you something. Look at that. The image is displayed at the moment in my environment instead of the gray color I had before. Okay, so this is what is lighting my scene. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of different colors. You've got yellows here, green, brown, you even got some blue. Okay, and we feel that this is just one color, but because this is an HDRI, we can't really see it, but there's lots of variations in this area, and that's why we use this kind of images. Okay, I can switch to another one if I want, to give you another example. And look at this. This is like a garage place, and we've got a lighting which is totally different, tinted with a bit of orange, but you've got a lot of colors. And again, if I compare it to what we had before, the difference is really obvious. So I would recommend you to use that kind of things if you want to light with an environment. What is great this, that if I set up a texture coordinate node and a mapping node, I can change the Z rotation of the image, and this will rotate the image. Okay, so that I can maybe align the shadows here with the direction of the lights I want to use later on. Another things, if you don't want to use HDRI images, Blender in its newest version has also something called sky texture, which is a procedurally generated sky. You can have a look at this. Very strong at the moment, so I'm gonna lower the strength. And if I look at this, look at that. This is the sky with an atmosphere, a ground, and a sun. So we can also use that, change its setting. Look at that. If the sun is low in the sky, then the environment is like a setting sun, more orange-like. Okay, so that are the two main ways to lit a scene. Now you've got the sunlight. Okay, I can maybe make this totally black, and this will make my render totally black. I only have the sunlight lighting my scene at the moment. The sunlight, you can find it and all the other light types in the light group. Okay, you've got the sun and 3 other type of lights. This is the sun. Okay, its position in the world doesn't affect the rays of light, because it is the sun. You imagine this is supposed to be very, very far away from us, so the position doesn't matter. Only its rotation is important. And if you look, most of the light types will have this kind of little yellow dots, and you can use it. If you hold left click on these dots, you can orientate the light direction, and it will snap to the geometry under your mouse cursor. This is snapping to the house, so it's an easy way to orientate a light. And of course, you've got in the light panel all the informations and the settings we've seen in the Blender Basics tutorials. And now the other light types. I'm gonna hide this, and I'll hide my 2 other lights. In fact, there are 3 other light types, but here I only have 2. I'm gonna show you the third one after that. This is a spotlight, and as you might have guessed, it's acting like a spot. So you've got, if I change the view to this mode, you've got a cone shape light, okay, with direction. You can either rotate it or use these little dots, as I have explained earlier, to orientate the light. And then you've got additional settings like the spot size and the blend. This drives the circle in the middle, and the smaller the circle, the smoother the light will be. If I go back to the render view, now make this high, and with this setting the light edges are sharp, and if I increase the blend, then you can see that the light edges are smooth. Okay. If you have a light selected, you can change its type directly here in its setting. So I'm gonna demonstrate the point light. The point light doesn't have any directional value because it emits light in every direction. Okay, from its center. Of course, if you change the radius of it, it's like a normal light. The smaller, the sharper the light will be, and the shadows, like you can see here. But if you increase its radius, the shadows will be much more smooth, like we can see here. And the last type, this is what I have here inside, is the area light. I'm gonna move it outside of my house. Okay, you still have this little point to orientate the light. And what the area light do, it's a square light. Okay, you can change its shape in its setting from square to rectangle to disc or to ellipse. And usually we use it to replace light going through a window at the same time casting something very smooth. So it's you can use it like in photography to do something like light boxes, okay, like that, and it emits light only in one direction towards this line. Okay, so now that we know that, let's go back to the other scene. So what we've seen last time is that, of course, it is nice to have an atmosphere or ambient lighting, but this space is closed in every direction. So that's a little problem, but of course, it's normal. If we are, and I wanted this to be set at night, so it's even worse. But if we are at night in a closed space, usually we don't have lights. But that wouldn't work because we want to see our environment and our animation. So what we can do for this, we can still set up, I'm gonna remove this point light that I have set last time just to see what's going on inside. I'm gonna do, remember at the beginning of the animation, we have this window which is open. So just not to animate it right now, I'm just gonna hide it. Okay, then close the walls and setting, and we're gonna set two views, one from the outside and one from the inside. This I'm gonna set in render mode so that we can see how this is looking like. There is absolutely no light coming from outside, but what I want is to still have light. Remember, light type we talked about that was good to simulate what's going through a window is an area light. So I'm going to create one and set it right in front of the window. Okay, like this. This will help me to simulate light coming inside. You can see that now we can see a bit more inside. From the outside, there is on this light a portal option that usually will drive or attract more of the outside rays in the inside, but I find that in this case it doesn't really work, so I'm not gonna use it, but you know what this is for usually, and so we already have something. But remember, keep in mind that later on this window will be closed. I can also, just for beauty's sake, add a sun, and this sun I'm gonna make it go as well through this opening like that. Maybe it's winter so it's a bit higher up, and the best thing I wanted to do would be to direct it towards the main part of this animation, this project, which is the book stand. Like that would be great. Okay, but again, this is not enough. That's just to be like to add something interesting to the project. And now what we need to do is adding lights inside, but those we should make sure they are not looking like there is like real physical lights inside. So we need to make sure the light is smooth enough for that effect. First, what I'm gonna do is duplicate these area lights and add it where the door is, so that even though there will not be that much light, we'll try to have a few hints of light going through the door as well. So let's have a look. If we go closer to the door, see, you can see here through the door, the gaps, that there is some light coming in. Maybe I will try to make the gaps a bit bigger, so we'll have more lights going through. If I increase this a bit, see it's going a bit more. So that will be a bit interesting. Let's increase that as well, the same way. See, this is lighting the interior, but again, because those will be closed later on, we can't count on that. Okay, so now let's add lights. You can either set up area lights again and place them in the spots where they will light the area correctly. But now that I think about it, area lights are great, but look at this, we can see they are coming from somewhere because they are directional lights. Okay, if we look at this, okay, we can see there is something here. Okay, we can't really see it, but we can guess. So we can either still use an area light, or we can maybe use a point light and make it like this, so that it feels like just ambient lighting, because the shadows are very soft. So this has a radius of 1 meter, and we can maybe have stronger lights and place a few of them across the scene like that. Okay, let's try it and see how it goes. One here, and one here. Okay, and that way, look at this, the scene is lit inside, and I don't really have the impression the light is coming from somewhere. If you look up, of course, and if your eyes are trained, you will guess that there is a light in here, but usually most of the animation, we don't look at the setting, we look here below. And now that we've got our 4 lights, what we can do is change their settings so that they don't, or they leave the scene a certain way, what I wanted to do because it's night. So let me first find these lights and set them in another collection. And ambient lights. Okay, this is area 005. To find the other one, just gonna type in area. Those one I'm gonna move toward also another collection. I'm gonna call them opening lights. Okay, and then I can also find my sun and move it to another collection, and I will call it light sun. I will rename all of this and start with the name light so that it will be just easier to find. And then, so we've got our 3 light groups. What I'd like to do is change those lights. If you have multiple objects selected, remember, if you change the settings, it will change settings of the active objects. But if you hold the Alt key on your keyboard and change the settings, it will change the settings of all the objects selected. Of course, they have to have similar settings and they have to be similar objects. So let's change this power to 50 first. I'd like to change their colors to a more blue light, and this I think didn't work on all of these lights. Now my ambient light has a kind of bluish tint that will also remind us of the night lights, because this is not a sun, this is a moon. I'm also gonna change its light to something bright but bluish. Okay, and the light from the openings should have the same kind of color as well. I'm not using something very strong, a color very strong, because we also want to still see, or at least guess, the materials from our objects. Okay, so now that we have something like that, let's close the windows and see how this is looking like. Okay, it's still alright, but remember, we've got a few other lights in our scene, and this, wow, this is very nice. You can see the light pattern it creates here. That's cool. We also have the chandelier at one point that will be lit, so there we can maybe add also a point light. Okay, let's bring it up here at the moment just to simulate the light. Give it a nice orange color, maybe something like that, and I'm going to increase its value. And now look at that, we got something which looks okay. We can see our objects, and at the same time we can guess that outside there is a strong moonlight coming through here, and that this feels like it could be candlelight. Okay, and because of course depending on the sequence, this candlelight that will be turned off at one point. I'm gonna get my point lights and set it in a collection, and I will name that sequence, let's say 1 for the moment, and we might change this, because what I like to do from now is to have a lighting scenario for each sequence, meaning that because the focus is different on every sequence, and one light scenario can't be good for all of them. And remember, the first one, or one of the first one, is focus on this object, and if I just set my camera here, okay, let's say it's like that. Remember what we did in the Blender Basics series. We actually use what is called a 3-point lighting to lit our objects, and this is exactly what we're gonna do here. And that's the goal of the lighting scenario that we need to set up for every single sequence of the short animation. Of course, I have to warn you, this is not the ideal way of setting up an animation project and a different lighting scenario, but because I still consider this to be a beginner tutorial and a beginner project, I want to keep it simple as possible, so this is why I'm doing this like that. One tool which is very useful, if not to say essential, when you're working with lights, and I haven't talked to you about it before, unless you've got like a calibrated screen, what you can do is go in the property panel in the render properties tab. At the bottom of it, you've got a section called color management, and at the moment by default the view transform parameter is set to filmic, but you can use the false color parameter and the display will look like some kind of heat map. So we can actually use this board to show what kind of lighting value correspond which color. Okay, so if we use it on the scene the way it is, we can see that most of the image is blue, so which is not bright enough. If we wanted the scene to be like just with a normal brightness, what I can do is deactivate the collection for the second one, and if I have selected the areas for ambient lighting, the middle color is something around a gray color, and then you've got green, which goes green yellow for the positive values and green cyan for the negative values, but this is like a normal lighting. I have my area, my point light, which are called area lights, but they are actually point lights. Okay, and they are set to 40 watts at the moment, which is not enough. 300 watts is something good, because you can see green and yellow-green colors, and that's how the scene will look like if it's correctly lit. But of course, we want the light to be a bit darker, the environment to be a bit darker. So if I set this to, let's say, 100 watts, now it's a bit darker, and I can then add my sequence 1 lighting, and maybe we could start with something like that. We still have some green colors, okay, on the things we want to see most, which is this, the book stand, and the other places are more or less going toward the blue, which is a bit darker, so that's good enough for us. What I can see here is that the walls there are in the background, okay, if we look at them, they are also lit and bright. Maybe we should do something to have them less bright. I'm gonna select only those two lights. Here they are, and maybe I can make this a bit less bright. Again, I'm holding Alt on my keyboard to change this value on the two lights, and let's turn it down until it is kinda blue, going toward the blue. Okay, like that. So this means that the entire scene will be a bit darker because it is night, and what is really bright and lit is our book stand, and this is where we want the attention to go. Okay, so that will be the scene with normal and correct brightness values. So now I'm counting on you to go through all the sequences and do this kind of work for the lighting. Now that you have the basis, okay. And of course, if you need any help, do not hesitate to ask for it in the comments. I'll see you in the next part, where I think we'll be ready to tackle the VFX of the projects. Take care everyone, have fun lighting all the sequences, and I'll see you next time. Bye.